Yeah. And it brings up a larger point too. When you talk to the people that have been in the military, and you and I were kind of talking about it earlier, you had those dudes that were old and that were salty and that had plenty of time in. And, all of my uncles were in the military. I had plenty of people that were around. They never talked about the bad times. They never aggrandized it or lionized it or put it in like the most glowing terms either, because they did serve through Vietnam. My dad was the youngest of a family of 8 people. Five of his older brothers were all in the military. My dad was at the very end of Vietnam, which means all of his older brothers had tours in Vietnam. So, they didn't talk about it in glowing terms, and they definitely would allude to every once in a while when I was a kid. Like looking back on it now, it's easier to put 2 and 2 together, what they were talking and what they were intimating, but their, reception when they got back from Vietnam and all of that other stuff. The difference is, and I liken it to a woman, during childbirth. Like a woman that has a hard pregnancy and a hard childbirth, you would assume that they never want to have another kid ever again. But we all know women, personally close in our lives. It's like a month passes, they're like, well, I mean, it wasn't that bad. And then your body actually puts off a chemical that makes you forget the worst parts of it. And like 6 months out, that's when you see like a lady, even with a hard birth or a hard pregnancy, they're like happy with their kid and whatever else. Then a year later, they're like, I don't know, I kind of might want to have another baby. And then that's when when it happens too. But never before in the history of the world, right, in that 13 to kind of 25-year demographic, it goes in waves, right? You get in and you're really idealistic and you're really excited about being in the military and you really connect with something that you feel is larger than yourself. And when you graduate basic training, regardless of what you think about the different services basic trainings, and I've obviously only graduated the Air Force's basic training, but when you graduate, you feel good. You feel like you're part of something bigger than yourself. You feel like you're doing that service. And then there's inevitably those hard times that follow, right? That E2 to, E6, E7 timeframe, whatever that is, that 10-year period. There are times where you're just absolutely disrespected as a person. You're sweeping a floor in the middle of a dust storm that doesn't need swept. You're like, what are we even doing here? Like you're waiting in lines, or people are not willing to help you after hours because their shop is closed for training 17 hours a week. You go over just to get your pay fixed and they're like, sorry, Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Friday mornings we're closed because we're doing training, and their training is playing kickball over on whatever field they're doing, whatever.
You're like, I work 12s nights. Yeah. This is the only time that I can be here this month. They're like, psh.
And by the way, I'm cutting into my sleep. Yeah. Like I work 12s, which means I'm there a half an hour early and I'm there at least an hour late. So really it's working a 14. And now you're cutting into my other 10 hours, which is sleep and eating and maybe, I don't know, having a life outside of this job. But never before have we had access to that middle part. Every once in a while, somebody who was super disgruntled would get out as like an E6 and they would just talk mad crap about it, right? Like they'd be so disillusioned and so mad about it that whatever. That's why people, I am number one hate club for, E9s and commanders and stuff that'll happy talk things to death, and I make fun of people for playing both sides of the fence all the time on it. But, because really at that point, like, as I look back over my career, and I'm sure you do the same thing, of course there were terrible times, but now at this point with a little bit of distance, I remember the fun times and I remember the good people that I met. I remember the good things that I was able to do. And hopefully I made a positive impact. I hope I'm net positive in my career for people that I've impacted, missions that I've had, or, things that I've done. I hope that I'm net positive, and that's important to me. But never before have the people that are out had access to those people in that middle, very low range. Right. And that's where every single anonymous meme, Redditor, people that are bitching, even people that are poking fun in a good way. Like I love Mandatory Fun Day. I love Justin Danger Nunley. I love Mil-Spec Believer. All those guys are doing good things. Like I think those guys are net positive. But even then, they don't understand that when they bitch about something, people that have no context, they just look at that and then they put it in this catalog of like, oh, everybody in the Army is dumb and everybody in the Marines eats crayons and everything is a false flag and everything is bullcrap, and sexual assault and extremism is just rampant. We got a DM today that somebody was like, do you guys want to talk about extremism, and white nationalism in the Air Force? I'm like, bro, I've never been on a team one time with anybody that has been a white nationalist and been like,
it's like good way to get your ass kicked. Is that
right? Like we're like, I just don't. It was such a dumbfounding question. I'm like, what do you want me to say about it? Like, I don't have any personal experience with that. And again, like, not to be hyperbolic, but that word extremism, Gadsden flags. When this whole extremism thing was kicking out, what was that, 2020 or 2021?
It's all a blur.
That ever since Harambe died, 2016 is the last clear memory I've had. It's all been downhill since then. We lost our minds a little bit. The pendulum swung way too far. And, having a flag that says "Don't tread on me," somebody's like, you got to take that down. It's an extremist symbol. And you're like, hold on. I mean, in the sense that America was built from insurgent terrorists that overthrew their government and made one of their own, sure, I guess. But that's not what we're talking about in the context of the word or definition or anything.